With my maternal grandmother for as long as I can remember. I don't remember my mom when I was a child. I grew up without my mom. I grew up without my dad.
So what would you say was the bad? Anything that would you be okay to share?
Oh yeah, it wasn't. It was bad because it wasn't a good thing that happened. But at the end of the day, my daughter has asked me several times if I could change how I grew up, if I would, and I tell her absolutely, 100%. I'm over it. I've forgiven every single person that has ever hurt me. I was severely physically abused.
Really?
I was beat up pretty much every single day of my life.
Wow.
By my uncle, by my aunt, by my grandmother, by my great-grandmother, and my great-grandmother, who I'll tell you a funny story in my teenage years about her, the way that God works. She hated me. It was the most, I would take my first 11 years of my life 1,000 times before having to experience what my mother put me through. My mother was not physically abusive. My mother never raised a hand on me. But my mother was awful.
Really?
My mother was...
So now I'm here with my dear friend Evelyn Lopez. I know Evelyn, I know you, I don't know how long now, probably since I started real estate like 7-8 years ago. And I seen the growth and the opening of your companies, because there's multiple companies, which is exciting. You own one of the largest, if not the largest, transaction coordinator company here in South Florida, closing more than 1,000 transactions every year from multiple realtors. You recently opened up your title company alongside with your husband, and now I know that you have a full staff on that. Since you've been in the industry for how long ago? More than 20 years.
23
in the
years.
title industry. You started as a kid, you were telling me.
I was a child.
Yeah. So I know you're a mom, wife, and such a cool person. So I wanted to bring you here to tell your story. I mean, a lot of us in the industry know the successful woman that you are, the entrepreneur that you are, but wanted to hear more about yourself. So I want to start there. Who's Evelyn Lopez? How would you describe yourself?
Wow, I would describe myself, and thank you, of course, for having me. I am super, super excited. I would definitely say this is the first time I've ever really just sat down and talked about me, other than just work. A couple of reasons. I'm really, really private. And not on purpose. It's just I've always never wanted to talk about who was Evelyn before PCG came into the picture. Even in detail when it comes to titles. Sometimes when I disclose what I've done prior to opening PCG, people are like, wow, I didn't know you did that. But mainly prior to that is because I don't want people's pity. I think that sometimes when you tell your story or the misconception of a person that's telling the story, you're like, I don't want people to misunderstand. I don't want you to put your pity. Just want you to know who I am.
And I want to hear some of that. I've heard just highlights of that. Where are you from originally, and where do you grow up?
I was born and raised in Honduras. I was born in the second biggest city of Honduras, but I was raised in a small coast town. It's called La Ceiba.
Okay.
I was born, I'm not exactly sure the circumstances of my birth. I hear so many different stories, and I love to ask a lot of questions, but my family is not one to answer them, and when they do, they all contradict each other. So I stopped asking those a long time ago. Is your family still over there, like your entire family? I have some family over there. On my father's side, a lot of my family's there. On my mother's, I think for the most part, most of them are here. I have a relationship with my mother and my sister. That's about it.
Gotcha.
With my maternal grandmother for as long as I can remember. I don't remember my mom when I was a child. I grew up without my mom. I grew up without my dad. And I grew up for the first 11 years of my life with my mom's mom.
Oh, wow. So all of that in Honduras?
All of it in Honduras.
When did you move to the U.S.?
When I was 11.
11, okay.
Yes.
So, but you now have could you say that you have a relationship with your mom now?
With my mom, yes.
Okay, and your sister, you said?
Yes.
Nice. So, Honduras, I've never been there, but I know that it's a developing country.
Correct.
How is life in Honduras? I've been in Guatemala, which is kind of like, I'm from the Dominican Republic. It's a developing country too. I was raised on the countryside of a developing country. So we have a lot of experience and how is life outside of totally different how it is now. So being a developing country, and you told me that one of the largest cities in Honduras.
So I was born in the second largest, but I grew up on the coast, which is just the top north, small
Same
city.
thing, kind of like the countryside.
It wasn't country. I literally grew up in what we say in Spanish, a barrio, which was just a very small town within a small town. We didn't have pavement roads. We didn't have a lot of things, which I'm sure at some point we'll touch. But it wasn't the countryside. That I had, people that we went to visit in the countryside, and it was definitely a different lifestyle. So it was city, but it wasn't in the city. It was in the outskirts of.
You and your
city.
sister, you only have one?
I grew up with my sister. She's a year older than I am.
Okay.
And we grew up together. We lived together. We shared every single experience together till I was 17. Because when she was 18, obviously I was 17, she moved out.
Okay.
So her and I lived the same exact life for the first 17 years, which is amazing for me. I think one of the biggest things, and I'm learning that now as I experience more of my spiritual faith within the church. I've always said, I didn't reconcile with God. I never left God, right?
Yeah.
I've always been very, very, very in touch with my spiritual side. But I'm learning more as to the things that happened in my life and the decisions that I've made in my life and how they were impacted by God every single step of the way.
That's powerful. So, as a kid, because I don't know, I have a pretty good idea since, again, I was raised in a similar country, or similarities, let's put it that way. For you, how was it as a kid? Because there's stuff to appreciate from, and there's stuff that you're like, I will never want to live that experience again. Like, what did you enjoy as a kid, or stuff that happened maybe as a kid that built character to be the person that you are right now? Because I can come up with a few things myself, but I'm curious, like, what was the experience for you?
It's funny thing, whenever you ask me about my childhood, I will only tell you the good. When I first, when we first started getting to know with Hector, and I started telling him more in depth when I got comfortable, he was like, why didn't you say that at the beginning? I'm like, because that's not what I remember. I remember being a very quiet kid. I remember playing a lot. I played in front of my house for hours on end, and I played. Sometimes we were lucky enough to have a rope to play jump rope. Play with rocks, sticks, leaves.
Yeah.
No
toys.
No toys.
Whatever it's in your environment.
Mud.
I remember doing that.
Yeah, mud, making
Sand.
mounds of sand so that we could do like a little stage and play like Miss Universe.
Isn't it crazy? And we still, so it's interesting because nowadays, and even more here in a country where you have a lot of opportunities and access to a lot of stuff, like kids do not need toys to have fun. Even here in my patio, when my nephews comes and start playing with those rocks, and they could come and bring like a bunch of toys and stuff, and they ended up playing with the dirt. Like, you don't need it. It's crazy.
You don't need it, and I grew up like that. I grew up playing with mud, playing with whatever there was. I did grow up next to a river.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and I used to go to the river a lot, so that was our day at Disneyland.
Yes.
We used to go to the river a lot, but a lot of what we did in the river, of course, wasn't always fun. But I remember when I think of my childhood, I think I made a decision at a very, very young age over that I was only going to remember the good, and it was definitely I had fun. I had fun playing. My neighbors were a brother and siblings as well that were being raised by their grandmother, and we played with them all the time. We had, of course, friends in the neighborhood, and we played. My sister, our neighbors,
awesome.
always playing.
You mentioned the river. I actually grew up next to a river too.
So you learned how to swim, and it was sink or swim.
Yes. There's some strong currents, and it was super fun. It's not the same, as much as you want to compare, maybe going to the beach, it's not the same. The experience is different. So I encourage anybody that have the opportunity to go to a river, and with that current. Where I remember at some of the rivers that you used to, or part of the rivers that we used to visit, have big rocks.
Oh yeah.
Or entertainment as kids, it's let me climb the rock and just jump as high as maybe 2-3 floors, which it was cool and dangerous too. So and also I remember my family and the older ladies, aunts and stuff, bringing lo caldero and stuff to cook next to the river. We used to spend the whole day there, and the kids just playing around. You used to bring the soap and just shower on the river. Because it's a source to shower to. So it's interesting. That's cool. So you mentioned you chose to remember the good.
Oh yeah.
So what would you say was the bad? Anything that you would you be okay to share?
Oh yeah. I mean, it wasn't. It was bad because it wasn't a good thing that happened. But at the end of the day, I my daughter has asked me several times if I could change how I grew up, if I would, and I tell her absolutely, 100% no.
It made you who you are.
It made me who I am. And to be honest with you, even seeing the resemblance of the choices that I made versus the choices that my sister made, as I mentioned earlier, her and I grew up exactly the same way. I can see where I very early on made very different choices. And going back to my spiritual journey, in we're doing a freedom course with my husband and I, and a lot of the things that they say is fear is a choice, right? Forgiveness is a choice. Everything that we do in life is a choice.
Yep.
And I grew up again without my parents and my grandmother, with my great-grandmother, my grandmother, and her children, which she had a total of 3, which she had a total of 6, but 3 of them were the ones that were the most present. One that was already married, but he was very much a part of our lives, and then 2 that lived. I mean, my grandmother had, I think her youngest son is maybe 6 years older than I was.
Wow.
So we're not talking about grown-ups, we're talking about children, helping children grow up. So now that I'm older, I analyze a lot of things, and talking about the thing of hurt people. My grandmother and my great-grandmother, every single generation that I can remember prior to was a certain way. They were all single mothers. My great-grandmother had 3 children with, I believe, 2 different partners. My grandmother had 6, I think it's 6 or 5, I can't remember right now, with 4 different men. Never married any of them. I believe the last one, there's a rumor that she was married to him. There's just so many things, so many questions unanswered. And because every single time that I asked the question, it was answered with either hurt or stop asking. I stopped asking questions very little. So one of the biggest things that I remember, the bad that I remember, and I remember it, and I can talk about it, and it does not hurt me. It doesn't bother me. I'm over it. I've forgiven every single person that has ever hurt me, is I was severely physically abused.
Really?
I was beat up pretty much every single day of my life.
Wow.
By my uncle, by my aunt, by my grandmother, by my great-grandmother, and my great-grandmother, who I'll tell you a funny story in my teenage years about her, the way that God works. She hated me.
Really?
Don't really know why. I never really got to ask her.
Never got a chance to ask her.
But she hated me. She used to throw rocks at me. She used to hit me with branches. She used to be like, "Oh my God, you're so ugly. You're disgusting. I can't stand you. You're just so ugly." And she was just some of these foul things. And I was like,
wow.
Oh, you're talking. I was like, wow. I mean, and I remember as a young girl, and we're talking about, now that I analyze and I see my children, I realize how incredible I was when I was a child. I remember looking at her and be like, I don't know who you're talking about.
It's like that.
That's not
that
me.
didn't.
I was like, I don't know who you're talking to. Yeah, and there was nobody there.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't know who you're talking to, but it's not me.
Yeah.
And she used to do that all the time. She used to throw brooms at me, like anything that she could find. It was just, she used to just spill this hate at me.
Who knows why? Huh?
I have no idea why.
Yeah.
My grandmother was also a very hurt human being. I believe that there's a lot of things that I don't know about my mom prior to her having us. My mom was a teen mom. She had my sister when she was 16. She had me when she was 17.
Yeah.
There's so many stories of my mom ended up going to different homes, and she talks about so many different things. And she actually, for a very long time, was very vocal about, in my teenage years, which we'll get to soon, that I was a product of rape, which I was like, and I'm very analytical. So when you tell me something, by the time you're done telling me, I've already analyzed the entire story and cut down like what is unimportant and what's important and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. So a lot of the stories didn't make sense, but my grandmother was a very, very upset woman. She was very upset, and I say was, not because she's dead, but because she is not now, or maybe she doesn't have the strength to be that anymore. I don't see her as that anymore. Beat up every single day, told that I was nothing, that I was ugly.
Wow. As a kid, we're talking about what age?
Since the time, I can't remember, till the time I was 11, there wasn't a day in my life I was not told I was nothing. My sister and I, obviously, you hear me say a lot of we, because again, we live the same thing. We would eat last. So if there was no food left, we either didn't eat, or we had whatever there was left over. And whenever there was nothing, they were like, you're hungry because your mom, who, the reason why I didn't grow up with my mom is because she had the opportunity to come to the United States, which obviously from another country, that's the opportunity of a lifetime, and create a better life for us. And she did. And she came here, and during that entire time, my mom was coming. So she would be like, oh, you see, your mom didn't say anything, so where is she now? Where's your savior now? Like, so many things. Like, it was, the verbal abuse was to an extent in which no child should ever experience.
Yeah, it's definitely, I could see how there was something obviously else that you don't even know what it was. It could be even a resentment against your mom.
I think she was angry at my mom.
Yeah, and she was like just letting it on you.
Oh, absolutely. She was angry at my mom. I think for a long time she was angry at my mom. I hear a story that my mom tells me that, of course, my grandmother would never corroborate that. At some point, I think my mom accused like one of her last husband of rape or something like that, and my great grandmothers who took care of her or who defended her, and it's just so many stories of so much pain.
Yeah.
So I don't see them as, one, an excuse for what they did, or two, as in how in the world did all this happen. It's just say, okay, I can see now.
Yeah.
Where when you bottle up and when you don't have the mental capacity to process things, you can just channel.
I remember, now that you mentioned that, I remember my grandmother from my dad's side being mean sometimes. Not to that extent. And to your point, I still never, because part of our life, me and my siblings, we grew up with her. She used to live with us. But to your point, when you start analyzing, as an adult, it's like, at least from my grandmother, it was the fact of not knowing how to process those feelings.
Yep.
She was an older lady that, didn't have any sort of independence, only had the, 3 kids in the home. Yep. And just randomly, just by situations or stuff that we used to do as kids, because we were kids, just getting mad and being to some extent mean.
Yeah.
Again, maybe not to that extent verbally and that type of abuse necessarily, but being mean. And I remember that. But to your point, I chose, and my siblings too, we chose to not remember that side of it. Because at the same time, the same person was the most loving person too. I remember on our birthday, she would go all out. Wow. That day, prepare a whole table of food, letters, collage with pictures, everything. On our birthday, it was wow, that was the day that it was a completely different person. So that, at least that day was a reminder, that is who she is. Just everything else is just a product of whatever she's going through internally. So it's true. It definitely, the fact that you didn't take it personally, that it was something that, it was definitely that she was going through something and didn't process it the right way, that builds character.
Yeah, and it was hard for me. The only thing that I remember being hard is the fact that she would say that, and then I didn't have my mother's actions to prove her wrong. So I believe I saw my mom in the first 11 years of my life, and I'm exaggerating by saying 4 times. Of course, now as a grown-up, I realize that buying a ticket to go to Honduras is not cheap. I don't know what she was doing here at 20, 21, 22, 23. I don't know how she was making ends meet, right? So I don't know her struggles. She doesn't talk about it much, but I know now that obviously it was difficult. And when she would come, she wouldn't spend time with us. She would leave with her friends.
Spend time with you? Really?
She would come, she would kiss us. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Gone. You wouldn't see her. So she went for 4 days or for a week. I remember one time, and that's why I tell you that I think I want to say 4 times because I'm being generous. I remember one time that she came, and it was probably when I was 7 or 8. She came, she said hello. She hopped on the back of a motorcycle, some dude, someone that she knew, and didn't see her the whole time. And during that time, and she was there, and obviously during that period of time, or whenever my paternal grandmother, so she used to live in the second largest city of Honduras, and they used to travel. I mean, back then we're talking about 2-3 hour rough terrain. There were no roads to come and see us on our birthdays. And 2 things would happen. One, they would hide us.
Really?
Oh yeah. So we would be hidden, and they were like, nope, they don't live here anymore. So here's this woman with possible gifts, and opposite of you, our birthdays were not celebrated. We didn't have Christmas presents. We weren't kissed goodnight. We weren't told we were loved. I was never, my hand was not even held when I crossed the road. It was like, I hope a car runs you over. And the uncertainty and the unsafety in that home, there was always, every day there was a burst out, whether it was my uncle and my aunt fighting or my grandmother.
How many people were living in the same
So
home?
it was 5 of us.
Okay.
And again, we had an uncle that he was married, and he lived in the same town, like around the corner, and he was my grandmother's enforcer. So as soon as he would stop by on his way to work, because my grandmother would cook for him, and on the way back, and she would literally have a long list of things that we did so we could get our butt kicked.
Oh my God.
And when I'm talking about, this is a grown man hitting children, between the age of, again, as long as I can remember, with electrical cables, with rocks. We used to punch with a closed fist on the head, because we used to go to church every single day, twice on Sunday. And they used to have us come to the vigils, the overnight thing. I'm a child. My son is 7. And if we were to fall asleep, we would get punched in the head to be woken up.
Wow.
And it was awful. And one of the hardest things that I had to process was again that my mom couldn't prove them wrong during that time, and two, that there were so many people within the church that witnessed the abuse and nobody said anything.
No one said anything. They
were praised in church. They were praised. Oh my gosh, my grandmother would walk in and it was like, oh, everybody, and I was like, who are you praising?
Yeah.
She's like, the devil. Like, seriously. I used to like get so angry at them. I wouldn't even get angry at her. I would get angry at them. Like, how can you praise that? So that tainted a lot of my perception of church. The hypocrites that would indeed be sitting next to me and among me, that were angels in church, and at home they would just abuse these small children that had no way of defending themselves.
So would you say that the fact that they didn't say anything, it was because they were justifying,
absolutely,
themselves, like that's probably her trying to raise her, the right way.
Oh, poor her. She got stuck with those two children. I didn't want you to say poor me, but I want you to be like, hey, listen, maybe you don't have to punch them in the head at 3 a.m. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't want you to take me out of it, but at least say something. If you, as a pastor or as a, good figure in the church, has the ability to say something, say something.
Yeah.
Like if you were to see me punch my 7-year-old in the head with a closed fist, you'd be like, Evelyn, we have to have a conversation about how you're allowing this to take it on an innocent child. Like, there's just humanity around that, you know? So to me, that was really like heartbreaking, because I was like, wow, like, do you guys not see this? Like, am I the only one?
Yes.
Am I the only one that sees this?
It's that's the thing. I could see how in the environments that we were raised, like, you see that and it's like she's educating her, like she's doing her part.
Right.
But they don't know what is behind the scenes. So what is the actual situation and the abuse behind it?
Yeah, and I think as when you go to church, even now that we're going to church, and I haven't congregated in church since I was a child. This is my first time. We're talking about 4 months.
Yeah.
The community that we have found to just be able to say, you know what, Hector, you can go and go to the men's, ministry, and I can go to the women's ministry, and there's just people that just are there to say, you are my brother in Christ. Like, I'm here to help you be better.
And have the trust to have conversations.
And then if I see you making a mistake, I don't want you to keep making it. I'm going to be like, hey, Brian, let's talk about how you can do this better. Like, maybe channel your energy better. I'm going to go pray for you.
Yeah.
So that was really difficult for me. It was but no matter what happened, I remember I was not fazed. My sister was. She's a lot more sensitive than I am. I was not fazed. I was like, tomorrow I'm going to get my butt kicked. It's going to hurt. Yeah, I'm going to be bruised. And it was bad. Like, I remember small times in which, like, my cousins from, like, the city would come and visit us, and we weren't allowed to come out because we were so bruised.
Wow.
And they didn't want to witness it. And they knew they were doing something wrong, because whenever anybody came, they would hide us.
Yeah.
They would hide us. Or when my mom came,
wow,
if you say something,
that's you see, that's where the difference is. Because I was raised, I got hit, that's one way to. That's the Latin way, the chancla and everything, but never to the extent to hurt you that is noticeable and physically. Noticeable. When he's like that's again within our standards, regardless of you support hitting kids or not, as a form of raising them. If you physically hurt them and physically, change their bodies, it's because you're going too hard. That crossed the line and becomes abusive.
Of course.
And the fact that they were hiding you guys, like, it says that they were conscious of that.
I think that was the day that I figured out. I'm like, so you do know you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So you do know, like, and I remember, we're talking about, and the reason why I can pinpoint the time frames is when I was 8 years old, we had a cousin of mine that came from the mountains, the country. She ended up getting pregnant, and she had a child at our house because her father didn't want her, and my grandmother decided to keep the child. My sister and I were raising that child.
Wow.
So every single time that child either got sick.
Less than 11 years old.
I was 8 years old when she came.
8 years old.
And I was changing diapers. I was feeding that child. I was in charge of getting up at night, along with my sister. And if anything went wrong, I was getting beat up.
Punch.
And I remember, that's what I remember. So prior to her being in my life, I remember being hid. And I was like, why are you hiding me? You do know you're doing something wrong. You know what I mean? So I became numb to it. I became numb to it in the sense it's like, you can hit me, it doesn't matter. My mom's coming, my mom's coming, my mom's coming, my mom's coming. And of course I would get angry, and I think at some points I would, say
vocalize
that. I'm sure my grandmother didn't like it, so she would hit me harder. And I didn't care. I was like,
so you mentioned that your sister also was grew up in that same environment, but she took these things differently. How differently?
Yeah.
Like, do you think that
she's still dealing
definitely
with them.
affected her and still dealing
I have
with
conversations with her as early as 24 hours ago where she's just like, I don't understand. How do you not remember? And I'm like, I do remember.
Wow.
I just don't let it faze me.
Yeah.
She's like, how did you get over it?
I think we all take in different ways. We have different personalities, and one of those, there's this book that I recently read, and I keep talking about it and going back. It's about personality types. It's called Attach. It's more about relationships.
Okay.
We have dependencies within our relationships, sentimental or just personal relationships. And there's this type of personalities called avoidant, which is, and I'm like that too, which what we do is anything like that we just try to suppress because our nature is to avoid conflict.
Right.
And it could be very light or as deep as it happened to you, and we try to avoid. That's the way to cope with the situation.
Yes.
But not everybody have that. Sometimes we can call it a superpower. It's a superpower because if you let it to affect you, still until this day are, processing that. Which is not that you're not processing it, it's just that you process it in a different way.
Correct.
So that is, I could see that, and it's crazy because a few people that have sit down in the previous episode have expressed the same thing, how they have siblings they were raised in the exact same environment and chose different path.
Yeah. It's a decision. And I remember, and I talked to, one of my biggest vocal therapists is Hector, because I feel like I've always been an internal therapist. Whenever I whenever I see a problem, I don't see a problem, I see a solution. And I've always been like that. And when I was a child, the solution wasn't my mom was coming, right? So this is temporary. It's temporary.
So that was kind of like your story, that you told yourself.
Oh yeah.
It's like,
hit me again. It's fine. My mom's coming.
There's gonna be an end to this.
And whenever they told me nobody loved me, whatever, I was like, you know what, God loves me. And I always remember saying, God loves me.
Wow.
I know that God loves me.
It gives me chills that you say that, because one of the reasons why I grew up in the countryside of the DR, I don't know if I shared that with you, but it was when my mom passed away. My dad, as a single dad, he used to work for corporate, full-time job. We were 3 kids. My sister was 3, I was 4, and my brother was 7.
Wow.
So he had to face the difficult decision of either, splitting us. Literally, that was the decision. Either splitting us within family members, because it was 3 toddlers or kids, or sending us to one family member that had the capability of raising us together. And I'm glad that he chose that one, because I was raised with my siblings and they're my best friends now. But that family member, she lived in the countryside, 4 hours away from the capital.
Wow.
So we're talking about the same similar situations, no paved roads, no electricity sometimes.
Yep.
Like, we used to go to outhouses here and there, grow next to a river. And to your point, what you described of like the way that you cope with is like you tell yourself that this is temporary. My mom is gonna come and save me in some way. For me, this is also temporary. My dad, it's as a kid, unconsciously, this is the way that you process it and tell yourself, my dad is getting his shit together, and then he's gonna come back for us. And that's what it happens at the end. We lived there for 4 years. He remarried. He moved out, bought an apartment, and then brought us back with him.
That's awesome.
So, in your case, I imagine it was like that. After you turned 11?
So my mom eventually did come to get us, and we were happy, right? Because like you said, where we lived, there was that sense of the poverty as well, right? We were very, very poor. Did not have water for a very long time. I remember having electricity sometimes. We used to wash our clothes on rocks on the river. Put them out to dry, and then by the time they were dry,
I remember
it would rain.
That trip to the river, like I remember the old ladies, like they took advantage of that trip to the river. Like everyone was playing. You cook, you wash clothes.
You bathe,
like everything all together.
Everything was there. So I remember doing that, and then just knowing that I was coming out of that poverty. We didn't have food, and when there was food, It's not like I would get first dibs. So there was just so many different facets and level, right? There was emotional, there was physical, there was, within the physical, there was the fact that we seldom had food. So I didn't eat a lot. When I was a child, I didn't eat a lot because one of the verbal abuses was, oh, I gave you that food, so what are you going to do for me? There was always that throwing in your face. Like there was always like, I gave you something, what are you going to give me? And that's the only thing that I can say that presently I still deal with because I don't know how to ask for help. Because I feel like the help comes attached, has strings attached.
We're so similar in that aspect.
Yeah, I don't ask for help. Like even I have my best friend is Dominican. She lives in Santiago. She's like, Evelyn, you get me so mad. Like you do not ask for help. I want to help you. And she does, and I won't let her. And I won't, I wouldn't let anyone for a long time. So my mom was coming, no big deal. Like you could hit me, you could do whatever. And then my mom came. My mom came and she flew my sister and I by ourselves to California. That's where I moved into. And we moved into a room in a house of a Filipino family. And I remember it specifically because they used to cook and their food was very smelly. It was awful. It was awful. And my mom was like, we came in, it was at night, and the next morning we woke up, she was gone.
She was gone?
She was gone. She was working.
Working?
4 or 5 jobs at the very least. She would deliver pizza. She would clean. She would do anything that you could think of. She spoke English, which was a very big advantage for her because we lived in California. We lived just in the south of San Francisco. So if you were Latin, you were Mexican, right? If you had your eyes, you're Chinese, and the other one, you're white. So there were only those 3 things. So if you were Mexican, you didn't speak English. So of course, my mom wasn't Mexican, and she spoke English. And my mom's very tall. She's very well. She's a beautiful, beautiful woman. She definitely doesn't embody what you would think of a Central American. So she always stood out a lot. So she had 4 jobs. She worked and worked and worked and worked. But mentally, physically, emotionally, she was not ready to have children. And I want to say probably about 6 to 12 months into living with my mother, I wanted to go back to Honduras.
Wow.
It was
because of the fact that you felt that kind of like abandoned.
It was the most awful time of my life living with my mother.
Wow. After everything that you went through, you still.
It was the most. I would take my first 11 years of my life 1,000 times before having to experience what my mother put me through. My mother was not physically abusive. My mother never raised a hand on me, but my mother was awful. Really? My mother was abusive in ways that I cannot even describe. Like I still, with the amount of information that my brain has processed, I still can't process how someone can be so awful to another human being, let alone their child. Wow. My mom was just incredibly awful. I mean, there's no other word I can describe it.
Wow.
And I remember I was like, holy shit, like what just happened? I was like, this is supposed to be my savior, God. Like what happened, you know? And here I am at 12, 13 years old talking into it.
This is what you were looking forward to.
This was it. This was the out. I was no longer going to suffer, right? Like your mom's supposed to love you. She's supposed to tuck you in. She's supposed to tell you you're beautiful. She's supposed to say something nice.
You didn't know that person until that point.
And she didn't know me.
Yeah.
So think about it. It's like having 2 strangers, because my sister and I were practically one, live together, and we're supposed to love each other, and we're supposed to. And I remember I had made this conclusion in Honduras, but a lot of the things that I decided in Honduras was God preparing me for that.
Yeah.
And I'm very much aware of that. My disconnect with my physical environment, my disconnect with my emotional environment, my disconnect with the lack of love. I was never embraced by my mother. I was never hugged by anyone. Nobody ever told me they loved me. So it was God preparing me for that. And God had a purpose for me. And that purpose was for me to be in the United States, because I always say that's the one thing I have to thank my mom for. She brought me to the United States. Because if I would have stayed in Honduras, I don't know what would have happened with me. And I came in, man, it was, I can't even describe it. Mom married my stepdad, I want to say when I was probably 13. Just came home one day and she was like, I'm married. Oh.
This is your stepfather now.
Hi. And by the grace of God, he turned out to be a phenomenal guy. They're still married. They're always killing each other, but they're still married. So, there goes that sense of me, right? I have a 13-year-old. If I'm going to bring a man to my house, like, who is this guy, right? Like,
how was your sister about the idea of moving? Like, did she feel the same way of wanting to go back, or?
I think my sister was a lot more affected because I think she felt like, you know what? It's my mom, so it's okay for her to treat me that way. Yeah. They're not my mom, so she felt more hurt by them than she did of my mom. But I think when she got into her late teens, I want to say probably 16, 17, she realized that was not right. And a lot of the people that came into her life, we had a middle school teacher that was her middle school teacher that saw the suffering, because we suffered. Like when we were in middle school and in high school, we suffered at my mom's. Oof, man, like no one should ever go through that kind of physical abuse. Mental abuse. My mom used to call me all kinds of names. Just tell me I was nothing. I was a piece of shit. I was nothing. You're ugly.
Hurt people. Because if you think about it,
she was very hurt.
You know,
we came from an environment that was super hostile, right? You never knew when shit was gonna go down. Yeah. And then we come to another one where you never knew when mom was gonna blow up. My stepfather, he never fought. He's very quiet. If you ever meet him, he's very quiet. Of course, at some point he had to, kind of man up because she's just awful. But
he didn't get involved.
He did get involved because when they fought, but when he was with us, no, he didn't get involved. He didn't come to our rescue. He was never like, oh, your mom was wrong for doing that. And until this day, if my mom decides that she's upset with me and she's not going to talk to me, he won't talk to me. So he did what she said. Yeah. He does what she says. And whatever, good for his marriage. It's all for him. But he came in, and of course he influenced my life in the sense that I was not allowed to exist.
What does that mean?
That means that I was not allowed to make noise. I was not allowed to chew gum. I was not allowed to come out of my room unless I was told I could. I was not allowed to exist. I was not allowed to watch TV. I was not allowed to anything. I came out, I had dinner at the table, I washed the dishes, and I went back to my room.
How old were you living in California?
California, I was there from the time that I was 11 to the time that I was 14. And that's one of the biggest things that I think, and it's funny because Hector and I talk about this. So, we've lived in our home for 15 years, and I will never move from my home.
Really?
And one of the biggest things is because moving from Honduras and changing my environment was exciting, but it was changing my environment, right? I left whatever friends I made, whatever comforts I knew, whatever food, because the food over there was amazing. That's one of the things I remember too. Like whenever I got to eat, I was organic food, I was picking out those
whenever
things.
You got to eat,
when I got to eat, it was good. So I remember that. And I remember my grandmother being an excellent cook, never taught me how to cook though. Never taught me how to cook.
Crazy.
The things that you think about, because I'm like, I want my children to learn how to cook, not only to fend for themselves, so they can help me.
Yeah.
So like if I'm making like rice and beans, like Isabel can make the rice, I can make the beans, like we can be a team.
That's a quality time.
Yes. So now I realize that she never taught me. My grandmother she used to sew for like the whole town.
Yeah.
She was great at it. Never taught me how to sew. Never taught me how to cook. Never taught me how to clean. Like I'm like, you would think that in any event, if there was no pouring into me.
Yeah.
Right. That was time spent with me that she wasn't willing to do.
There were expectations still, but it's like there wasn't like.
No, it's like you had to sweep, but I'm not going to tell you how. And then if you do it wrong, I'm going to beat you up for it.
You figured it out. Yeah.
I had to figure it out. So when we came here, so we moved when I was 11. My stepfather is a computer engineer, so obviously the Silicon Valley was the ideal place, and he started positions where he was channeling Latin America. So obviously Latin America can be better access from South Florida. So when I was 14 years old, my mom was like, all right, everybody, let's pack up. We're going to Florida. No asking. Not that you need to ask me. It was no conversation.
After like at 15 years old, you were already moving to a third part of the world.
14 years old, we moved here. My very first day in high school, South Broward High School, was on Valentine's Day. I remember it like it was yesterday. Of course, everybody was giving each other everything, and here I am, first day in school. So that was an adjustment for me. It was hard. I think socially, I had a really hard time because I already came from a home that was telling me I was nothing, from a home that was telling me I was ugly. And then you come to the world, and you're just like, okay, But I never wore that badge. I never felt like I wasn't entitled to be anywhere that I wasn't. I'm going to be honest with you. I know it's going to sound really, really corny, but I always knew God was with me. I was like, what? Awesome. Like, God is with me, and He loves me. Yeah. Like, I don't have daddy issues. I've seen my dad maybe, 5 times in my entire life. Yeah. I don't remember him hugging me. I don't remember him looking at me, to be honest with you. The last time I saw him, he wouldn't even look at me.
So would you say that you forgave everyone?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have zero resentment against them.
That's definitely the reason why. The fact that you mentioned God, 100%, but also the fact that you chose to forgive.
Oh yeah, God was like, don't worry about that.
Never hold
I got
resentment.
you. Yeah, God's like, I love you. Yeah. And I always saw that. I always felt like God was always protecting me. And as I'm older and I think of the things that I could have done, the fear of God never allowed me to. I never did drugs. I never, fell into anything. I mean, I was a very, very good girl. Yeah. What I did stop was trying to impress my mom at a very early age. And that wasn't by doing bad things, but I wasn't doing anything.
Attention,
Oh no, I didn't care for it. I actually didn't want her attention. I was like, if she doesn't look at me, she can't yell at me.
Yeah.
If she doesn't know I'm here, she can't yell at me. So I spent a lot of time in my room. I made really, really good friends. Of course, my sister, was processing all that. And I believe around the time that I was 15 and a half, and I remember because my brother was born, I was 16. The joke of the town, of the house, became that I was really, really dumb.
Oh my God.
Like, oh my God, Evelyn, you're so dumb. And I was like, okay. I remember I didn't say anything. I remember I wouldn't argue it. So the joke of every night, whether it was dinner or whenever we got to congregate as a family, it was a laughter that I was so dumb. Like, wow,
That's
Evelyn,
crazy.
like, you're so
That's
dumb.
Crazy. I wouldn't have imagined that you went through all of that.
I mean, it was like, oh, Evelyn, wow, you're so stupid.
That's crazy.
Yeah, you're right. Evelyn's not so smart.
So,
oh, poor thing.
The fact that you obviously chose to forgive or not to hold resentment, that gave you the power to continue. And it translates now, like, I don't feel and I don't see you, perceive you as a person that can raise even your kids like that. Or the opposite. What I see, that you try to build that relationship, strong relationship with them and spend time with them.
Oh, yeah.
Which you broke that chain.
I broke that generational curse,
you know, like from your grandmother, your mom, and then you broke the chain, which is super powerful. You marry somebody that it's been a present father to.
That was
and you guys,
very important for me.
Yeah, and
very
you guys
important.
are raising like the kids the right way. So you moved to Florida, and then went through high school, had your challenges too. How do you get into the business world or the professional world?
So when I was 17, my mom sat me down and she said, your stepdad, your brother, and I are moving back to Cali. 1, 2, 3.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh. I was like, okay. And she was like, so you're going to be good, right? I was like, yeah, I'm going to be good.
Oh my God.
So from the apartment that we were living in, we ended up living in efficiency for a short period of time because my stepfather had already left.
Sister?
No, my sister had already left.
Oh,
my sister jetted out of there as soon as she could. She went back to California to live with the middle school teacher that I told you was a really big, like, she saw the suffering and she, took us under her wing. And she, it was mainly my sister. I was kind of just the, the extra. So I never felt completely connected to her, but I enjoyed the time that I spent with her. Yeah. She wanted us to read books and all these different things. This was in middle school. She went back to live with her and she had a big influence in my sister's life. My sister ended up going to university. She went to in England. She studied in England. Awesome. She got a career. She did great for herself professionally. And
literally, the middle school teacher took your sister.
Oh yeah, and up until the day that she died, like I think when I moved to California for a very short period of time before I married Hector, for various reasons that I felt like I needed to do that, and I lived with her sister, who's still a very good friend of my sister. But my sister's always been around them, and I believe that they had a very big influence in her professional and her worth professionally. And unfortunately, I don't think they've been able to help her enough with her worth personally. And I was like, when she said that, I'm telling you, God was like, don't worry about it. Brian, I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried. I wasn't anything. I made this really good friend when I was in high school. Man would leave me alone. I say man because he's a year older than me, so he was a man. And he was my best friend. And we laughed a lot. I mean, I used to go partying with him, get drunk. I did all those things that you do as a kid with him. Always protected me. He was like, nobody could touch me, nobody could look at me, nobody could anything. So when she decided that, I was like, I went to talk to my best friend. I'm like, yo, like my mom's leaving. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, she's leaving. He's like, so you're leaving? I'm like, I was not invited, I
was not invited.
So we were living in that efficiency. I think it was like $200 a month. So I talked to him and I said, look, I don't have a car. I was working at the same place that he was at the time. I said, we work together, so I need you to help me. Take me to and from work. I'll take care of the rest. He was like, okay. We had the same schedule. Yeah. So he was like, okay, no, I'll pick you up and drop you off every day. No big deal. I was like, okay, if you can do that for me, I'm good. And it wasn't even a question. Like, I knew he would do it, but I just said, like, this is a permanent arrangement. I need you to know.
Yes. And remember, you were talking about the person that has
17 and a half.
No, and have issues asking for help.
Yeah, and I was like, we were already doing that because I didn't have a car, but I was like, this is like a permanent. Like, I want you to know that if you can't take me to work, I can't go to work. There was no Uber back then, right?
Yes.
So you couldn't Uber to work.
That was the only ride that you could.
It's the only ride that I could. So he said, yes, absolutely. My mom left. I stayed in the efficiency. And, for a while before, he was already pursuing me as something more. I couldn't see him as anything more than my friend. I didn't quite understand then. And then eventually, he was my safety net. Within a few months, I mean, I'm here by myself. I have no one except for him. Not on purpose. I have no one. I have no aunt, no uncle, no cousin, nothing. I have no one. So eventually I was like, you know what, God? This person has been here for me when no one else would. I'm gonna start going out with him. Like, I gotta give this a chance. He obviously loves me. He obviously understands he knows who I am.
Yeah.
And his family, his mom, man, that woman, I was like a princess in a glass box. There was no wrong I could do. So anyway, I married him when I was 19.
Wow.
I married him when I was 19, and his love saved me. I truly believe now that his love saved me from so many things that I don't even know. God was like, that is where I want you. And I didn't question it. I didn't ask God why. I didn't look over to see if there were other options.
Yeah.
I feel like every single step of the way and every single life decision, including the decisions to forgive those who have hurt me, have been God saying, you got to do that. In order for you to move forward, you got to do that. You can't take that baggage with you. So when my mom left, I remember just being like, okay, let's go. I'm ready. What are we doing? I wasn't talking to anyone. I was talking to me. What are we doing? I remember being in that efficiency, be like, what are we doing? So I married him when I was 19. We bought our first apartment when I was 19.
Oh, wow.
Right? We bought our first apartment with that one loan program that ended up being the one that everybody got foreclosed on, with $500 with Citibank, which is all you needed in order to buy the house, that we borrowed from his friend.
Oh my God.
That's how unqualified.
Was
he was a year older. He was 20.
Okay.
That's how unqualified we were to buy a house, okay?
Yeah.
So we bought a condo, and I remember going to the closing table, and again, here's analytical Evelyn, like, what are these people doing? You know, we signed all the documents, and I left with this curiosity. And I remember looking at him and being like, did you see that? El pobre, he was like, no, what are you talking about? Like, they just did something. Like, they just had us sign documents, and I just continue to replay the closing in my mind, And I Googled it. I was like, what is it that you do when you go and sign for a house? And it's like, oh, it's called a closing, and all these different things. I was working at a telemarketer thing then. And so I was like, I told him, I said, I think that's what I want to do. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, I think I want to go do that. He's like, do what? Like, what are you talking about? I didn't know real estate. I had never known. My parents owned their first house for the first time ever 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So he was like, I mean, okay. Like, you know, that's the thing. Like, when I make a decision, I think whoever knows me is like, I don't think I can talk you out of it. So he's like, do what you, I mean, I don't even know what to say to that. So it was here in Coral Springs in Ramblewood East. I don't know if you know that community. And I literally looked on the yellow pages, you know, those existed back then.
Yeah.
And I looked for every single title company in Coral Springs. And I called every single one of them. And I said, hi,
they were hired.
My name is Evelyn. I don't have any experience in title, but if you're willing to teach, I'm willing to learn.
Wow.
One said yes. One. Town and Country Title was on University and Sample. And the lady was like, look, we're looking for a post-closer. I was like, I have no idea what that is, but I'll take it. And they're like, oh, I live close. I can even walk there. Don't worry. Transportation is not an issue. And we were fine. Let me tell you something. I never struggled financially. I was always very good with my money.
Nice.
I never struggled financially. At the very beginning, when my ex-husband and I started being together, we did struggle. There were times in which we would go to his aunt's house conveniently during dinner time, right? Because there was no food at home. But eventually I was like, this isn't forever. Like, that was maybe like 2 or 3 times. Like, I always worked. I always saved our money. I always made sure we had our means. We had new cars at 19 years old. We were perfectly fine. So anyway, so I get to this position, and, you know, I start, and they start teaching me, and I mean, I learned like that. Like, it was a week. And I was like, okay, what am I doing?
20.
I was 20 years old. Yeah, because that was right around the time that I turned. And it was in 2000. My birthday is right in June. So I started learning, and they were like, okay, this is what you need to do. My job was to check all the signed loan documents to make sure they were properly, fully executed, and that everything was ready, because back then you had to FedEx a package to the bank, and you had to FedEx a package or courier a package to the county to record documents. So everything was physical.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, okay, so what is a note? And they were like, it doesn't matter, just make sure it's fully executed. And I was like, so one day I took a copy of an entire package, and I took it home and I read it.
Yeah.
I read it.
To understand.
And he was like, what are you doing? I was like, he's like, so you're supposed to learn this document? No, I'm supposed to make sure they're executed. He's like, so why are you reading them? And I think that's when he started realizing how incredibly ambitious I was at knowing what I was doing, why I was doing it, and how I could make it better.
Yeah.
So they taught me how to post-close, but I post-close. Man, but I'm telling you, like, there was nobody better than me. And I learned that within a week I was post-closing like they wanted me to. Within 6 months, I was post-closing like nobody else would.
Wow.
And then I was bored.
It's crazy that that's how you started in the industry. I mean, it makes sense. And when you say 23 years in the industry, it's like, of course, that was your very first
that was it.
formal job.
And then do real estate too. Yeah, like real estate. Like I didn't know what real estate was until I sat at the closing table and I was like,
That's
I want to do what you're doing.
That it was literally with your first purchase that you made that decision. It's like, okay, I like what I see here. I kind of want to do that.
I think what I wanted was to deliver that kind of service and that kind of happiness. I was happy purchasing my first condo at 19, and I remember that for a very long time, everything that I would be on the receiving end of, I would learn from it. Every single person in my life has taught me something I want and something I don't want. And my mom, my grandmother, my everybody, including my father, and his inability to want to be present, taught me that I would never have anyone that I love be in the receiving end of that hate, but I wanted to be in the receiving end of that happiness. So I was like, that person made me happy. Wow. What do they do?
Wow, that's
so I started doing that, and then I got bored in post-closing, and I would see all the other positions. So they had file opener, pre-processor, processor, closer, signer, and post-closer, right? So I went to the lowest position on the opposite end, and I was like, what do you do?
In the same company.
So what do you do? Oh, I open files. That teach me? Maybe one day you have too many and you need help. And of course, people were like, yeah.
Of course.
Taught me how to do it. Done. Then I would go to the pre-processors. What do you do? Well, when you order the title commitment, it comes to me and I go over it and I clean it. Okay, show me how to clean title. Just like that. Before I knew it, I worked for that company. I left that company when I was 23. And I knew how to do a file from the time that it got to all the way to the end.
Wow.
Like incredibly. I learned how to balance. I learned how to do everything. And it wasn't because the positions opened up, because I would go for them. And at some point, people were like, wait a minute, we need another pre-processor. Evelyn, can you do it? Because it was easier to get a post-closer.
You could have filled the gap in any position.
Oh, I filled it. And I went ahead and I moved up. Then I ended up being a closer. And then I was 23 years old, married, happy. I was happily married. My ex-husband gave me everything that I needed, wanted, desired. It didn't matter. He gave it to me. He loved me to an extreme that I never knew I could ever experience, and I loved him for it. That's awesome. I loved him for that. I didn't love him.
What happened?
As a husband, I loved him for that. But when I was 23 years old, my great-grandmother got sick. She was dying.
Your great-grandmother?
Great-grandmother.
In Honduras?
In Honduras. I quit my job, I left my husband, and I went to Honduras to take care of her for 3 months.
Wow.
I bathed her, I cleaned her, and I remember when I walked into her room, she started crying.
How old was she?
Definitely late 80s, probably 90. She just started crying.
Really?
And she was like, out of all of the people in my life, I never expected you to walk through that door.
Wow.
She's like, because I hated you. And I was like, oh, I know. Don't worry. You made it very evident. She cried, and whatever. I was fine. I mean, here I am living my entire life that I have built on my own, and I needed to fill that need, and God wanted me there. So I took care of her. I stayed there for 3 months.
And it's crazy because you from Honduras to California, then Florida, and then once you have something going on for yourself.
I left.
You literally left everything. Just
I left my husband. Imagine if I saw Hector right now.
That started the.
Yes, imagine if I saw Hector. I gotta go.
Yeah.
I'll see you in 3 months. You know, and he'll be like,
Yeah.
So anyway, that happened, and then she ended up dying. I came back, and I ended up leaving that company, and I started working for my longest title job, and that was for an attorney that is now one of our sellers' attorneys. I became really, really good friends with him. Throughout those years, he taught me everything that I didn't want to learn, everything that I wanted to learn, because man, did I ask the man questions. I drove him crazy. I still don't know till this day how that man likes me. I drove him crazy. And he was the kind that wouldn't give you the answer. He'll be like, why don't you go figure it out? And I was like, but I don't know how to. He's like, oh, you know how to. And sure as anything, I would figure it out. Because sometimes our insecurity in ourselves doesn't allow us to see the answer. And now I think unconsciously he saw more in me than I saw in myself. So he saw how smart I was. He was like, man, you're bright. Like you are. And he wouldn't tell me because he's like, I know it'll go to your head, but you're different. And I started working for him from 2004. And I worked for him till just before Alexander was born. And then I ended up having another job then.
Everything obviously in title.
But I did everything in title. And with him, we went through that huge recession in 08, 09, 10, right? So we did everything, Brian. When I'm telling you, we did, and we didn't know what it was, by the way. We would just take on the work because we needed to work. We did and lose. We did cash for keys. We did evictions. We did foreclosures. I don't even remember half the things that we did. But I didn't know what it was. He was just like, there's a box right there and they're deed and lose. I'm like, what's a deed in lieu?
Yeah.
And he was like, go figure it out.
Figure it out.
And I did. And it was that. And so eventually, because of his hard work and his staff, which was us supporting him, He ended up having a huge, large title company. We used to do about 250 to 300 closings a month.
Wow.
Staff of about probably 20, 23. I was one of the 2 supervisors. We used to look at every HUD, every deed, make sure there were no errors, but also carry our own volume. So we were closing 60 to 70, the two people and ourselves, along with everybody else, closing a tremendous volume.
So obviously you never changed industry since then. You stayed in title. So what happened on the personal side?
So on the personal side, one day, it was definitely God. He was like, you need to move. You need to move. And I was like, but I'm fine.
Felt that.
I was making plenty of money. We were doing fine. I mean, again, this man couldn't love me any more than anybody could.
You were what, late 20s?
I was 23. When I came back, just before I turned 24. And within 6 months, I was divorced.
Wow.
I was divorced. I literally told him, look, I can't do this anymore. And he was like, okay, what are we doing? Obviously, lots of things happened and not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. I mean, I literally was texting with him to make sure I was safe on my first date with Hector.
Wow. So
this is like how it went bad for a little bit, but it didn't remain bad. His love for me was greater than that. And I remember he wasn't happy. And one day he told me, he's like, I'm gonna tell you this right now. He's like, you're never going to find anybody that loves you the way that I love you.
Wow.
He's like, and you're gonna regret leaving me. And I remember just looking at him and being like, okay. And I remember acknowledging the fact that I was never gonna find anyone that loved me the way he did. He was 100% correct. And I divorced him in 2004. I met Hector in 2006 and married him a year later. So really small things happened in between because it was such a short period of time, but it was exactly where God wanted me. So I can't tell you that I left him because he abused me. Never. Yeah. He never yelled at me, anything, never cursed at me.
He was probably the first person that gave you some sort of a stability.
Oh God, by all means, his love saved me. His love saved me.
Everything.
Imagine the 18 years old being on your own. I could have, I don't know, gone to stripping,
you had all the
with an older man,
to go their own path.
Done drugs. I mean, I could do whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
He saved me, and I partied with him and everything, but he always protected me. No matter how drunk I got,
awesome.
He was always there to take care of me. So I left him. He was never happy with me. Still till this day, he doesn't talk to me. But, he has his things to do, right? And I had a relationship between Hector and between him and Hector, which I knew wasn't good, but God was like, just wait for me, hold on. And I know it sounds so weird that I keep saying that God told me, but that's the only explanation I have, Brian.
I could see how God literally moved you from one.
He was like, just wait for me a second. I got the person for you. And I wasn't waiting for the person, but he was just telling me, I need you to stay right there. And I was like, but I know that I'm not supposed to be here. He's like, I know you're not supposed to be there, but I want you there. And I ended up meeting Hector and marrying Hector. And when I married Hector, all that happened in that job that I had for so long. I left that job when I had Isa there. I was pregnant. I worked till the day I gave birth, but Hector was able to experience a lot of it. So we did auctions. We used to go to live auctions because, again, there was no work. And we did this one auction where it was 4 days, it was 2 weekends, Tampa, Orlando, Miami, and Fort Lauderdale. And each day, Saturday, Sunday, a whole day, we were in one city. And we traveled as a company. It was probably like maybe 6 of us traveling with him. And Hector came to the local ones because we needed bodies. Because we couldn't handle, we had no idea what we were doing. But we showed up to an auction. It was a convention center and all and I was like, what's going on? We sat at a table and we took turns where one of us was carrying the money bag. He had these contracts because he was also trying to figure out what he was doing. Like, where are we getting these contracts? How many of these auctions do we have assigned to us? I don't even know till this day. And one day I'm going to sit with him because, again, he's a really good friend. He's like his family. How he even got himself in that room. And we would walk away with definitely hundreds of thousands of cash.
Wow.
Because at an auction, you can't give a check.
That's insane.
Cash. We would get back to the office, put all these files, because we had folders for each contract that we got. So basically, when somebody won the auction, they would come to our desk, sign the contract, give us the money, and leave.
That's insane.
I had no idea who we were. They were just sending the money to us. Anyway, we would go put him in a box, go the next day, same thing for 4 times. So I would want Hector, and Hector would come, and he was our runner. So he would go and pick up the person that just won the auction and bring them to our desk. So he was our runner. And he did that for 2 of us. So that was his first experience in real estate. He was like, this is nuts. And he was like, do you know what you're doing? I was like, nope.
No, but we'll figure it out.
We're going to figure it out. And then the Monday after the last auction, it was a staff of 4, including the attorney. And I think it was 3, but I'm going to say 4. And it was about 2,000 files. And the other girl and I are like, I'm like, you take odds, I take evens. She was like, let's go.
Wow.
I started processing them all, ordering title, ordering lien searches, clearing. When you're talking about these convoluted titles, I can't even, I mean, I've had to find dead people, visit people in jail. Like, if you can think of it, I did it.
So let me ask you, I'm curious. So you don't have a formal education?
I don't.
You never went to school?
I don't.
But as far as title, like, you know everything that someone can know about title.
Not everything, but I've learned my good share of things.
With everything that you're saying, you're even using terms that I've never heard before. You went through situations that not even attorneys go through.
Correct.
Like, you probably could say that, from what you're expressing, that you probably have even more experience than some attorneys in the industry. And it brought you where you are right now.
Correct.
So, I remember when I met you, late 20s, that you're with Hector, hustling on the title side. I know that he probably went the other way and started working on a corporate job.
But he had a corporate job all his life, so that's all he knew. So Hector started at the same time that I did, working in title, working in the food industry. So that's all he knew. So he worked.
So you both then basically started working on your own thing in that aspect.
Yeah, he was working in food, corporate, and I was working in.
You still were in title.
Oh yeah.
What then? When do you decide? Because that's pretty much when I met you. When you were leaving the title industry and started transaction coordination.
Yes.
What changed? Do you get bored? Do you get exhausted, drained?
No.
What happened that you were like?
I loved every single minute of what I did, and I wanted more.
Really?
And I wanted more.
So what changed?
But there was
Why do you
nothing
decide to?
greater than, at that point I was a parent of two. And my daughter, who I was dropping off at 8 in the morning, picking up at 6, was of course going to aftercare. And sometimes I would have conversations with her, because I'm very, like, one of the biggest things that I've always loved about the kind of parent that I've become is, and I can literally talk about it for hours, is that I always wanted to talk to my daughter.
Yeah.
And of course my son will as well, and I do talk to him now, but he's he's younger. So she was my first experience as a mother.
Yeah.
So I remember talking to her, how was it? What did you meet? And she would tell me things that I was like, I don't know if I want my daughter at 7 years old talking about that. So there was God again. So you gotta move. And I loved what I was doing, because on my last title job, I learned the title side of the investing.
Wait, talking about what?
Title.
Title.
Yes, I learned investing.
Okay.
So I only worked with investors on my last title job, and I didn't do that before. It was my first experience ever, and I learned so much from these investors and how the investors file worked, and how they were doing, flips, and how they were doing double closings, and how they were doing, assignments, like everything. When I'm telling you, like, I was like submerged in this real estate part that I had never learned before. So my curious self, I wanted more. It's like, if I learned so much in such a short period, I was only there for 8 months, and I learned so much, and then God's like, you gotta move. You gotta move. And my move was because I did not want somebody else raising my child. And those,
so it was more because it was very time consuming at that point?
I couldn't spend time with Isa.
And you couldn't spend the time.
I couldn't spend time with her.
That's why you jumped. And I remember that. I remember when you started. Because again, that's when I met you. That you were starting, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. And you start like building relationships to people to show the value on that. Evelyn on the transaction side. Fast forward, right now you're closing more than 1,000 transactions from multiple realtors. At all levels, I imagine. Which is crazy. To a point, correct me if I'm wrong, you grew that business by yourself, while Hector was in the corporate side of the food industry, to an extent that you open up opportunities for him to come and start working the business together. Hector he has been a crucial part in expanding the business. On the operational side too. And the dynamic that you guys have is awesome. He brings stuff, the way that I perceive it is that he brings stuff that you might not have. And the opposite way too.
100%.
He's a very people person.
He brings so much knowledge. Like, I tell him, I'm like, man, you are so smart. Like, I've met smart people, but when he sees something and he executes, it is perfection. And I admire that, and
awesome.
and I saw that very early on from him, but I didn't have the means to bring him on. And when he did, he completely changed my perspective of business. I was working as a transaction coordinator before he came.
Yeah.
And when he came, I became the owner of a transaction coordinating company.
Which is awesome. That's
Yes.
amazing. And the fact that, because not every couple, as much as you wanna, it looks in paper, looks easy and good. Anybody that sees it, that's awesome that you guys are working, but as much as you would want to do something with your spouse,
Yep.
it's not easy working together.
It's hard.
Like you gotta find your place,
Yeah.
and give the other person, the significant other, their position and empowerment to.
Yeah. It's hard at the beginning, I think, because you have these two powerhouses that come together, right? Hector knows so much, and then
Yeah.
I know so much.
Yeah.
And then we're trying to find a common ground.
Which I feel that by now at least.
Oh,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm sure that at the beginning you try to kill each other.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe now still,
Nope.
but
We actually laugh a lot. It's funny because we make fun of it a lot, because if people knew like the amount of laughter that goes on behind this,
but
we always laugh.
I know that it comes from the fact that especially him, as Hispanics, men, we have that pride and machismo of wanting to take over.
Yeah.
But I noticed that he give you your place, and
Oh,
he
yeah.
treats you how you are. You're the president and founder of PCG
Yep.
transaction. So the fact that he respect that within
Yeah.
the work, in the business side, it's what also has led to the success that you guys have.
100%.
Not about
And him
taking
loving
over,
it. Yeah, and him loving it as much as I do. He came in and he was like, I want to learn. And he came with just this open mind of
humbleness.
Yeah, I want to learn. You're willing to teach. Let's do it. And I remember at the very beginning, I told him, I said, you're going to learn real estate, not as a baby. You're going to learn it as an adult backwards, because I'm going to teach you to a level that most people in our industry don't know. And that's not in a cocky manner. I've done so much.
Yeah.
So because he was so willing to learn, and I was so willing to teach him at a high level.
Yeah.
I didn't take baby steps.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you have, like, yourself, so much, and then you bring him on, and it's like someone that doesn't know anything.
Yes.
It's not that you guys group together and learn together a lot of this stuff. It's like that's why it's crazy, the fact that you bring him over and he has been able to adapt. Again, I know that you mentioned he's a super smart guy.
So smart.
And the fact that, again, he has known his place and in the equation, and have allowed to have what you guys have, which is amazing. And the fact that you guys are able to grow a family together, be present for your kids, and be intentional raising your kids, that is super powerful. And the fact that I know that you mentioned too, that you have maybe more recently, and he has shared that with me too, he has come back to his journey with God and building that relationship with God, which makes it even stronger.
Oh yeah, we're building really, really strong relationships within ourselves, with our children, and with everybody around us. And I think one of the biggest accomplishments personally for me has been that the only comments, how people like walk around with these comments like, oh, somebody once told me this, I tell you, obviously, because we were talking about it, that as far as my parents not necessarily thinking, and I think up until maybe a few years ago, if not still, there's a huge understanding in my family that I am not the sharpest tool in the shed, and I'm like, I will take it, keep thinking I'm dumb, so as much as I take that with me, but I don't, whatever, it's more like when my ex-husband told me, like, that I would never find someone to love me the way he did, and he was 100% correct.
Wow.
I found somebody that loves me better.
Wow.
And Hector loves me in a way that Hector has a capacity and an ability to love Brian that I've never seen in my entire life.
That's awesome.
He loves selflessly, he loves intensely, and he loves to an extent in which he's like, I just want you to know that you are the most important person in the room when I'm talking to you.
That is awesome.
And he loves a lot of all of you like that.
Yeah,
it's crazy. I love seeing that.
It's crazy that the more I get to know you guys, and now that I get to know your story, which is crazy, I didn't even know 5% of everything that you share that you went through, and it makes sense now on why you are how you are, and how that experience shaped you into the woman that you are. The fact that he has a completely different personality, I could see that, and that God put him in your life to complement that you lack in your life, because you express yourself that you lack that affection, not having your dad present, the way that your mom, grandmother treated you.
Yep.
The change of environment from Honduras to California to Florida to go back to Honduras, like that can mess up even the best of us. And the fact that you took that and transforming something beautiful ended up, again, just following God's guidance in every step of the way. So I'm super happy to see the growth that you guys are having and be a witness from the beginning, you know, and being part of it too.
Yeah.
The fact that we get to work together. I know that you mentioned, I'm curious, I ask you, what's next for you guys? I know that you have the transaction company. Now, recently you opened the title company, which it's been a huge success for you guys.
Success, yes.
And you mentioned that you're working on a university for transaction coordination too, to try to teach other and coach other companies on that industry. Tell me a little bit about that.
So one of the driving forces of putting that together, and we're going to launch it in 2024, is because, you know, as I am in every situation in my life, as you've obviously seen the story behind it, I always look to see where there's a problem and how we can solve it. And I've seen a lot of I guess you could say transaction coordinating companies and individuals that just really do miss the mark on a grand scale.
Yeah.
And I'm blessed enough to say that my experience is what allowed me to take the position itself and elevate it to a higher level. I think that as a transaction coordinator, we are relied upon to have a lot of knowledge, and a lot of transaction coordinators haven't had the experience to apply that. So it does a disservice to the industry, where a realtor's like, I can't do that, I need you to do it, but they're like, I don't know how to do it. And they may not necessarily be in the resourceful mindset to say, let me figure it out, right? Because when you tell me when I tell you I don't know how to do something, by the time you call me again, I'm gonna figure it out. So I was very compelled to do that. And there's so many different ideas that I have of things that I wanna do in the future. And I know I'm gonna do them. That's one of the things, I don't have no fear. I'm like, so what if I fall flat on my face? Just get back up. We're going to do the university in 2024. Obviously, Hector's putting all this stuff together for that, to teach and to share the knowledge that not only have I learned in the transaction coordinating world, because I have learned so much. When I started doing this, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I'm not a licensed realtor. I wasn't a licensed anything then. I'm a licensed title agent now, right? But I just brought all this experience, and it's like you have a bag full of goodies, but you don't know what to do with it.
You don't know what to do. And I'm glad that you guys are figuring it out, and you're using your talents to bless others. I mean, you guys have that heart. I mean, Hector is coming with me to Guatemala. It's one of the few. I had so many people telling me, Brian, let me know when it's the next trip. A lot of people. And then it's like, okay, here's the next trip. And the only one that raised her hand and show up, and it's like, I'm going with you, Brian, it's Hector. So that says a lot about your hearts. Yeah. And I know that God has been blessing you guys professionally because of that, because you're givers too. Amen. And you share everything you are. I'm super excited to see everything you guys gonna build and witness each other's success. Yes. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. It means a lot, the fact that you felt comfortable in doing that, and I know that it's going to touch a lot of people. A lot of people that know of Evelyn or think that they know Evelyn. I think in this interview they're gonna get a better idea of why Evelyn who she is and has accomplished what she has accomplished. So thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you for having me. I gotta get rid of this thing. Hold on.